Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. It's 11 o'clock sharp, so we're going to leave a bit of time for people to join in. We give them another minute or so, and then we get started. You can see that there are some people we recognize that are attending. Great to see you here. We'll see the number go up. So let's just give it a few more seconds for people to join in this morning.
How are you feeling?
Good. Spring is coming to Stockholm.
If it doesn't snow this afternoon.
No. Let's hope not. How are you, Micaela?
Good, as long as it doesn't start snowing again. Then I'm great.
Nice. It's also great having this as one of the last things before Easter. I think it's a good round-off. All right, we are a minute past, so I think we start. There might be some more people to drop in, but let's start here and now. My name is Svantemark. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SustainLab, and with me is also my colleague Micaela Quesada. She's Chief Sustainability Officer here at SustainLab. SustainLab is a SaaS sustainability management platform that helps companies and organizations to collect, analyze, and visualize their sustainability data so that you can spend less time on data handling and more on actually accelerating change. And that's very tied to the topic we're going to talk about today. So the topic for this webinar is Don't Let Bad Data Kill the Planet, how to create accurate sustainability insights.
We're so excited to be here, so thank you for joining us today. No one wakes up wanting to kill the planet, and we know we're getting more demands on collecting more data, but we also see that we're collecting data wrongly, and that's not leading us to take the right actions. So based on today's topic, we invite you to respond to a short poll. So on the right bottom side, you should see a button that says polls, questions, and chat. If you could please go to the poll and choose one of the three options.
And so to make sure then that we don't kill the planet with bad data, today we will cover the following 4 topics. The first one being common problems with data collection and how to solve them. Then we're going to talk about how to get started with sustainability data, what analysis we should be making now and in the future, and then we're going to wrap it up with some best practices when it comes to sustainability data handling.
So this is new, so let's see if I can... There we go. All right, so it's quite even between I know a fair bit and I know a lot. So great to have a mix here today. Please add, you can continue answering the poll, but please add any questions that you might have to the question button also at the right bottom, and we will try to answer them later.
Good, but let's dig in then to the first topic of today. Common problems with sustainability data management and how to solve them. So what's quite unique about SustainLab is that I, as a founder, have real-life experience of being a sustainability manager in my previous job, and also Micaela has worked with sustainability management in companies previously. So we have experienced the challenges that we're now trying to solve. I was sustainability manager in Europe's largest frozen food company for the Nordic division, and I experienced a twofold challenge. So I did the sustainability reporting for the group. By then, we were on 17 markets. There were 14 owned factories, and to that, about 2,000 suppliers and third-party producers. And I have loads of people who reported data to me. And I did this in Excel the first year. The data came in various formats. It came in various languages. Sometimes I needed to call people to get to the data, and I still didn't know if the data I got was actually the correct one. Of course, this took so much time. And since it took so much time and since it was so manual, we could only collect the data once yearly. And the sustainability report was due this time of year, somewhere around March, April, for the previous full year, which meant that part of the data that I had collected was 15-month old. And this was when we had updated data. And that brings me to the other challenge I experienced, because I was part of the management team and Nordic board. And in these board and management meetings, when I wanted to use this data to drive change, we would compare this 15-month-old data with day-old or week-old financial data or other type of business critical data. And despite having a good strategy and despite having good people on board, we took the wrong decisions because we didn't have up-to-date data.
I completely agree with you. I was also working with sustainability at a construction company. And the first year we forgot the energy consumption for one of the factories in one location. And then even when we got into the process and we really get the reporting more into our DNA, so to speak, it was to meet the legal demands, and they were expanding. It was more data. We also wanted to show progress on our targets. And then the process was way too manual. So we wanted to see this on a quarterly basis, which is what we aim for. And then it was way too manual. But then the biggest problem that I faced was that we had, when we set our science-based targets, or our climate targets in 2019, we did a spend-based analysis, which means that the materials and the climate impact from the materials were based on the cost. And so when we chose, for example, to have more sustainable materials, to go from a really bad mixed concrete to a greener concrete, and it was more expensive, the results went into the wrong direction. And that was really frustrating.
Yeah. And still, that was best practice in 2019. Yeah. All right, so apparently we had and experienced a lot of the same problems. And to summarize these, the first problem is that working with sustainability data is super time consuming and you get a lot of errors because of the manual nature of it. The second problem is that we see a lot of increasing legal and regulatory demands. And we know that also auditability and traceability demands of the data will increase now with coming legislation. And thirdly, this process, since it is so manual, since it is so time consuming, since it is based on assumptions that might not be correct, we get to a very infrequent, low quality assumption-based decision material. And this really is a blocker for change. And it's so common. We see these problems again and again with the customers and potential customers we meet daily. So if you recognize yourself in our stories, you're not alone.
Okay, so those are some of the common problems that we had. And now we wanted to discuss with you how you can get started with collecting and working with sustainability data. So when we decide as a company to start working because we want, or we need to start understanding our sustainability impact better, there are a few things that we think you can get started with. The first one is align on ambition level. What does that mean? So expectations among stakeholders need to be agreed upon. Basically, you need to decide, do you want to be a leader in the sustainability field? Do you want to be a leader in one aspect of the sustainability? Are you fine with being in line with your peers, or do you do it basically for compliance reasons? I can think of several reasons why to be a leader, not least the investment part, and that it's investment attractive and talent attraction.
And it's the right thing to do.
And it's definitely the right thing to do if you want to keep not killing the planet. So, but nevertheless, you need to agree on it, because the stakeholders will decide what will be the mandate, what will be the resources, etc. And the second is finding the focus and measuring what matters. This is typically done with a materiality assessment or a materiality analysis, which means that you conduct a process to identify and prioritize sustainability issues that are most critical to your business. And today, companies are faced with the complexity of double materiality because of the upcoming legal CSRD regulations. And that means that companies will need to analyze both from an impact materiality and from a financial materiality. And this is a really good process to start to really understand what is included or what should be included in your sustainability agenda, because we can't also do everything, but what is the priorities and what directions do you want to go? And no one says it's an easy process. I think we've both done it as well, but if you do it properly the first year, then you will get the right insights and you can build up on it and update it in the coming years.
And once that's done, so we know what is it we really want to measure, it's time to do a data inventory. And this can sound a bit scary if you haven't done it before, but there's really shortcuts to get started. We recommend to divide your data into 3 buckets. So firstly, we have the data that we know that we have, that we know we can measure. Secondly, we have the data that we're missing. We want to measure this, but actually we don't have the data yet. And thirdly, we have the data we don't know about yet. And this will be an ever-changing scope in all of these buckets, but especially maybe in the third one, because sustainability is an involvement. It's not like we're going to be there at 2030 where all the major targets are, and then we're going to have new things we want to measure. So the third bucket is always going to change. There's always going to be uncertainty here. And when you start working with data, we really recommend you to adopt the mindset of there will be uncertainties. The data will be less than perfect initially. I think in general, this is something we're not great at as sustainability managers or working in sustainability. It's usually very ambitious people wanting to do the right thing. But here we really recommend to adopt the mindset of the data won't be perfect the first time and there will be uncertainty in it. For the second bucket, when we talk about data we're missing, so we know we want to measure this, but we don't really know how. There are some shortcuts to get there. So you can talk to your industry association, who probably know a company among your competitors or your peers that do this already and that might be able to help. And another thing you can do is to just look at other sustainability reports. If they are measuring what you want to measure, there's probably clues there to how they have done it. When it comes to measuring frequency, this is a very common problem still, is a common process that there's so much we want to know, there's so much we want to measure that we make a really big data scope and then we can only measure it once yearly. We really recommend to find a small scope initially to measure monthly or at least quarterly. I talked to a prospect the other day, and she was so excited because they had just released their second sustainability report. And she said, "Oh, it's so great because we have something to compare with. We have last year's data." I said, "That's great. But what if you had done this measured monthly instead? It would have taken you 2 months and not 2 years to get to those insights." So when you start to measure this often, you get to the understanding of what's not perfect here. How do I need to change my data? How do I need to change how I measure? And if we then do this on a monthly basis, we get so many more learning opportunities. We get so much faster iterations to getting to that perfect data analysis. And once you have that process in place, that we do this frequently, it's so much easier to build on and add to that scope. And for this to work well, of course, this is not a one-person show. You need the support from your organization. While sustainability strategically really needs to sit at the core of the company, the work to report this and the work to take action on this needs to be distributed in your organizations. So you need to have help from people all across your organization and probably beyond as well, with suppliers, for example, to get to the data you need to get to the insights you need.
Mm-hmm. And there are some ways to get started. And so when you have a lot of collection, we want to analyze it, right? So the question that we discussed was, what analysis should we be doing now and in the future with our data? So if you're just starting off, like we just mentioned, the frequency is really important. It's fine that the data isn't super granular at the beginning. But you will build up on that. With this frequent reporting, you will understand what granularity you need to reach to set the right baseline and from there set right targets. And I don't think we can stress it enough, but there is going to be assumptions. We cannot get rid of it. So we need to have a plan, including assumptions and including estimations, including generic data at the beginning, for example. Then we will define how the baseline is, how good the quality of the data collection is at the beginning, to make a plan to get rid of those assumptions and to get to more robust data and to just slowly building those estimations away or replacing them with real data. So concretely, in my previous example with concrete, what I wanted to show was progress on changing, for example, that material, or also it could have been any material. But I had only based my analysis on costs. If I would have done even some based on examples on quantity and quality, it would have already been a bit more robust to understand, okay, if I replace, it wouldn't have been perfect because I wouldn't have gotten to all the material, but I would have been extrapolating or making estimations based on the parameters that I then want to show progress on. And as I said, this can be done in basically any category. So if you're what is most material to you.
And once you have started to do this analysis, the next step is to start cross-referencing your data. And this is when it gets very exciting, I think. So looking at one data point at a time surely brings you insights, especially when you can compare it over time. But when you start cross-reference your data, that's when you get to new insights. So we had one customer, when we looked at the gender pay gap, we saw that there was no gender-based pay gap, which is great. But then we looked at the gender distribution in that company, and the majority of the men worked at the more senior positions, and the majority of the women worked at the more junior positions. So based on that, there was still a pay gap that was gender-based, but it was hidden when you didn't cross-reference this data because the gender distribution was so skewed. And cross-referencing data is going to be more and more important going forward. We have mentioned the coming legislation CSRD a couple of times. There, understanding the financial impact and cross-referencing the financial data and non-financial data is getting more and more important. And that brings me to one of my personal pet peeves, is that the business model of companies are usually not included in the data that's tracked and reported. So what do we mean by this? Well, understanding your business model is understanding where you earn money, from which products, from which customers, from which services. And to take a very concrete example, what's the point of having a line of, for example, sustainable material in clothing when your business model is based on fast fashion and selling lots and lots and lots of clothing? That's where we need to go. That's what we need to understand. How do we earn money? Where do we earn it from? And this is going to be more and more important in the future as well.
Because we see like people are understanding this more, so it's really becoming a demand, right?
Yeah. The maturity is increasing very fast, and of course that's something we're happy about.
Yeah. Okay, so even when we're taking all of these parameters into consideration, and that's what we should do, and we work on the assumptions, we really need to accept that we don't know the future. We don't know what it will look like when we're forecasting, where we're taking decisions for our business on that. We need to take into consideration that the world is evolving fast and that it's maybe not going to go in the direction that we think it will. So if we take biodiversity is a crucial issue that really requires urgent action. So today, or to this end, we have decided to have ambitious targets based on COP15 that we really need to address the current state of decay. Okay, we're going in the wrong direction, so we are setting these goals, but we really need to track our progress. That's essential, because how will we know what direction we're going to? To do that, we need to adopt, for example, nature-based solutions that we could collect, we can compare, we can implement, and we can start doing it now with different and small scale and different projects, because we really can't afford to wait. By not waiting, I mean that we need to collect different projects. I would say that if you have different projects, you can start collecting data from the beginning of each project and just compare that and say, okay, this worked better, this didn't work. And it becomes a bit complex because you want to do different pilots, maybe you want to collect different data, but as long as you do it from the start of each project, you could measure progress. And why I think it gets a bit complex, but what can help really is technology. We have it there. You really use technology as an enabler. We have it as a tool that can really collect and analyze large amounts of data, where you can, if my example with biodiversity, you could take historical biodiversity levels, you can take the pilots and the models that you're working on, we can create models and much more to inform us about what is working well so that we can create or restore different thriving ecosystems. So ultimately, of course, when we keep the vision of creating a sustainable world, that can be as far away, it can be farther away. But what we have today is technology that can be used as an ally. And I don't think in sustainability that we're great at using it yet as much as the full potential that it has.
No, I actually read the other day that 95% of global decision makers thinks that digitalization and technology is essential to sustainability, but only 36% of companies have implemented some form of technology when it comes to sustainability. So, of course, this is a hugely underused asset currently. Okay, so to sum it up, let's look at some best practices when it comes to sustainability data measurement. First of all, increase the quality of your data over time. Well, we do recommend really adopting this mindset of the data will not be perfect initially, and that's totally fine. Make sure that you have a plan for how to increase the quality and reduce assumptions as much as possible. Secondly, limit the scope of your data connection initially so that it's small enough so that it can measure on a really, really frequent basis. Because then we learn faster and we can expand the scope from there. It's much harder to start with a giant data scope that we measure once yearly and then convert that to a monthly basis.
And I think in line with that, if we're saying, okay, it's a lot, but then let's make smaller scopes, we can also do that by collaborating and dividing responsibility and ownership of sustainability topics. So if we look at the regulations and CSRD, the ultimate responsibility may lie with the CFO, but of course, he's going to include collaborators and controllers and sustainability and operations and HR, and all the topics that are included in these demands. And that makes it quickly to become a lot of stakeholders that are involved, and it becomes a complex ecosystem of who needs to be involved. But that's what you want. In order to maximize your reporting efforts, you want all the people that need to be involved to do the reporting. You want them to be the one collecting. You want them to be the ones that also get the insight so that they can take decisions on the actions, on implementing initiatives when it comes to mobility or gender or whatever. You want them to be involved and get the right insights. And as well as this larger that Maria mentioned with the decentralized and centralized, all of these small collections of data and targets will feed into a centralized sustainability reporting at a higher level. And that's still important because that makes an organization's shared vision.
And really to understand which data does which stakeholder need to be able to take the decisions for actions going forward. So tailored also the data output for that stakeholder is super important.
Yeah, and that's because from what I mentioned, like you can have certain people being the ones that are collecting and delivering the data, but you will also need the right stakeholders, for example, in management team. They're not going to collect data, but they will need the insights. And what we say with the tailoring the data output is to make it really clear what is the information that they need to take the decisions on.
And that brings us to the last points, that we need to also ensure traceability and transparency of the data. There will come new legal demands on auditability of the data, and that it should be able to verify the data. How can you do this in the best way? Well, ensure that you have the raw data or the source data or the original data. There are many names to this, but basically the first point of data available. And then all the calculations, assumptions, extrapolations based on that needs to be visible in one unbroken chain. And one real benefit of also starting from this raw data is that then you can automate more part of this process, which is actually the last point when we talk about best practices, is automation can really help in a lot of this, making this less manual, less time consuming, increase the quality and ensure the traceability from the raw data all the way to process results. So you don't need to create any extra processes for auditability purposes.
And again, you have it automated, so you do it again, and it's easier to get the insights and leveraging on technology again. Like why you don't need to do it by yourself, and you don't need to do it manually as we used to do it.
No. So there we have them, the 7 best practices that we'd like to share today about data collection and data management. And I see now that we have quite a few questions and in the chat. Let's have a look at those. Great to see all of you here. Maybe Micaela, you want to start with one of the questions.
So the question is, how will SustainLab help companies to prepare for CSRD? Thanks. I think it's a valid question after mentioning it 4 times. And we have two ideas and products to help with the technology and the software that we have. One of them based on the amount of data that needs to be collected and that many have to do it for the first time. We're going to have a gap analysis tool to really understand where are my gaps, what do I need to focus on, because as we know, CSRD covers ESG, and then it covers what is material to you. So the first thing would be a very easy and quick way to understand, based on all the legislation, the entire legislation, what do I already have in place. And it's going to be very simple for you to understand what you have, what you don't have, and what you don't know, because sometimes it will also be a question or a process that you maybe have not nailed, and then there is a lot of definition behind that you need to understand. So it could also be in that bucket, what we talked about, the buckets, the yes, no, the maybe, and that's going to help you. So we're going to visualize that for you easily so that you can take it with your stakeholders and divide the ownership and say, like, okay, here's where we really are lacking processes or data. How do we do that in time? And starting with that, that's something that you can start with working with us now. And then as the legislation becomes final, hopefully by June, and then the sector specific will come at some point, we will have the full CSRD disclosure, because our platform is really well placed to collect basically any of the data points that you need, and also this complex ecosystem from data owners, and dividing and having it automated and having it more frequent, because then you could look also at CSRD not just from a compliance perspective, I have to do this once a year, but how can I actually ensure that I see this data more often, that by the next official CSRD reporting, I have implemented the right actions. So there it will be tailored to what the legislation asks from you, if it is a description, if it is calculation numbers, or if it is tables and so forth. So we'll stay tuned, because that is obviously going to be finalized when the legislation is finalized.
Super exciting and very good question. Oh, yeah, that you seem to like that.
You're celebrating with us. Great.
Well, CSRD, I mean, we all know that this is the big thing coming this year. So, of course, we're going to help you be prepared for that. Let's take another question. So, a lot of the examples when it comes to sustainability data are from the environmental sphere. Can you give some example from social sustainability and how to measure that? Very good question. And you're right, we often take environmental examples. We touched upon gender pay gap and gender distribution on different seniority levels as some examples from social data. I would say those are the very basic ones. Understanding your own organization in terms of diversity and inclusion, in terms of health and safety, injuries, accidents, and so on. But again, also understanding what's your social impact with your business model, with the products you sell or the services you provide. One example, we have customers in the pharma industry, where it's, of course, it's super important to understand if the medicines that we provide are equally efficient for men and women, for example. That's one way of starting to measure this in the social space. That's super important for that industry. But it all comes back to materiality, which Micaela has talked about. So what's material for one industry is not the same as the next, but including social data is, of course, very important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will need to be our last question.
Wrap up. This was fun.
This was fun.
If you have any more questions, contact us, because we're not going to... There is the contact.
We are, as Micaela said, super exciting, fun to be here. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for watching. Contact us if you have any questions or we could help you in any way. Look forward to continue the discussion.
Thanks. Enjoy your day.
Bye.
Bye.